Welcome to our AVID Media Composer free webinar. We're going to be discussing version 2021.5. We have some sponsors to thank. They are the Saramonic and the Dell Corporation providing us tools and computers to work with. So let's jump into it. When you open up your Media Composer, in this case the Media Composer 2021.5, the Ultimate flavor, the first thing that you will notice is it has a page that directs you and shows you what are the choices that you have in terms of existing projects or starting a new project. If you're novice to Media Composer, you will see that Media Composer follows and accepts all the standard presets, starting with the PAL NTSC, going to the 1280, 1920, then goes up to the Ultra HD, 2K, 4K, 8K, and 16K. So if you want to start projects, those are your choices. Now, if you have a preset project like I do, you can just double click on it, opens up, and you will notice that the interface is a magnetic interface. I have cut together some sequences. So the first sequence I'm showing you is a variety of clips. Each of these clips are separately colored. And here's the question: how do you get those clips to be of a separate color? So the first thing that you need to address is, where do these clips come from? So if you know where they come from, you go to the bin. By double clicking, the bin opens, and I see in that bin a number of clips that have a color column to the left of the icon that represents the master clip. If you right click on that color icon, there are some preset colors, or you can pick from the 5 additional tool sets that give you colors. One of them is the crayon, then you have the spectrum, then you have the little boxes, and the slider, which gives you a mix of red, green, and blue, and as well as the color wheel. So picking the color is very simple. You assign to each of those clips a color by right-clicking to the left of the master clip icon. And when you are ready to bring them in this case, I already have something in the timeline, I have to clear it out. You go back to the bin, select the clips that you added color identification to them, highlight all of them, and simply drag them into your timeline, thus creating a brand new sequence. Well, magically, the clip colors that you had in the bin now transferred into the timeline sequence, and you now have an ability to identify how much of each of these clips are you using if you are using the color. Where does that color information register? If you click on the bottom left-hand corner and you open up your tool, that is the track color, you can define what color will each track be. But we're looking for the clip color. In the clip color, we chose to use the source, and when that is chosen at that time, the color becomes a source. Now, if you don't have it, then the track color globally for the entire duration of that sequence is a specific color. So if you want to change one of the colors, like in this case, let's change the color of the video track. You go into the drop-down, fast menu, activate the track color, and in the track color choices, you pick whatever color you have as a default, or pick something brand new. I'll pick a nice orangey color, and now the entire track is that particular color. If you want to go back to the clip of each of those elements being a different color, you have to go into the clip color, activate the source, click it OK. Now you are back to where you were just before. The next tool I would like to introduce to you is top and tail. So let's identify and find where they are. They should be in the command palette, and you notice that the tabs identify the family. The family that you and I are going to be looking for is the edit, and in the edit, the 5th column has on the top and tail. Now those are button-to-button assignment. So essentially you just drag them from the command palette onto a location, and when you're done with it, it would be a good idea obviously to save it so it stays. But right now, what you are doing is moving your playhead in the timeline, and the playhead defines what are you cutting off. If the playhead is in the middle of the clip, like in this case, and you use the tail, you will cut off from the playhead to the tail, which makes sense. And if you have a specific duration to cut off, this is where your next step of complexity comes in. Like, for example, you want to move your playhead from the beginning of the clip of the sequence 5 seconds to the right. Now, the first thing would be find out how long are these clips. And in the name selection in the viewing, you are able to find out name as well as the duration. Now, if the duration is not big enough in terms of fonts, you can change the font, and in this case, I'm going to go up to 24. So now you can see it. Well, you can't because you're zoomed in. So Command right bracket should zoom in. Now you can see that the number of the clip is actually the second and the frame. And if you are still worried about what the clip text name of the clip is doing, it's interfering with you, turn it off. So now you are looking only at the duration of the clips. And you can see that I have clips 7 seconds, 8 seconds, 9, 10, 11 seconds. The shortest is the yellow all the way in the middle, actually past the middle. So how do you cut off everything that is past 5 seconds? Using your numeric keyboard, which is on the full-size keyboard, all those numbers all the way to the right, type in +5 and 0, signifying that you are typing in 5 seconds and 0 frames. And if you hit enter, the playhead should jump 5 seconds from that point on. If you hit at that point the tail, guess what? You're cutting off from that blue playhead the tail section. And there it is. If you want to move in that 8 second, again, hit plus on the numeric, type in 500. The playhead should jump 5 seconds ahead, tail, cut it off, and you continue doing that throughout the whole timeline, cutting off everything that is longer than 5 seconds. So this tool, top and tail, in this case we're using the tail, is a very helpful in fast-paced, fast cutting. So try to use it, or at least consider using it. So let's move further with this concept. So you're going to be cutting onto a location, or you're cutting onto a beat. If it's a musical bed that you have, clearly you can cut to certain beats. But the question is, how are you going to be doing that? What are the prerequisites? So here they are. The next step is identifying what are the beats that you want to cut to. If you count music beat 1, 2, 3, 4, or 2, 4, something like that, you would need to be able to identify those. So in this scenario, I will turn on the waveforms so I can see it. But before I do that, I brought the music down a bit because it was very loud. So I used the viewing where I look at the clip information and the clip volume. I clicked on the icon that represents the fader, and I brought it down to -15, both of those tracks. Now you notice that I selected a section and I deleted that filter. Clearly, this is a technique where you are paying attention to what is in the timeline. But there is another way to deal with this, and that would be simply switching over from the edit tool to the audio mixing tool. And in the audio mixing tool, you can notice that the faders are already lowered by 15 decibels. So how do you do that in the audio mixing as opposed to doing it in the timeline? Again, I'm selecting the segment with Shift A, which is the red segment, deleting the filtering that I just added, the -15. And I'm going to switch over now to the mixer, the audio mixing. I will gang the two tracks, track 2 and 3. So whatever I do to one fader, the second fader that is connected gang is responding. I want to be specific, so in that area where the green numbers show up, I type in -15, signifying that I want to draw or bring down the volume -15 dB. And when it's done, it is pretty much the entire clip duration -15 dB. So now you can hear it much softer, and you can see that the meeting point between the VU meter, the green and the yellow signal going up vertically, is on the right side 0, and on the left side it's -20, signifying that that is your 0 safety. You should really not go more than +6 in analog, and maybe about up to -14 digital, but that is dependent on what kind of music and what kind of show you are doing. With that, let's move on to the next element. I'm going to reset the colors of the clips in the timeline to the default, and that was done again, fast menu and reset everything. And you will notice that in the new version, since 2019 version 6, the time code is put in the center. So if that time code track is in your way, oh, by the way, I'm going to change the colors in the meantime back to normal, different colors. You see that brown timecode track is in the middle between the video and audio. For some people it's practical, for some it's not. If it's not practical to you, holding down Option, clicking into that timecode track and dragging it down, you should be able to move it down to the bottom, so it is going to look the same way as you're used to in other application. And if you were AVID user before, that's the same way it was in the older version. So that is just rearranging how the track assignment is. Now let's find out what else can we do. You can now hear the music, and you will be able to define where beats are. So if you count the beats, you can obviously count them based on your sensibility. So I'm going to try to count it out. And before I do that, might be a good idea for me to see the waveform. So if the waveform is to be seen, you turn on the master waveform, and as we see, the waveform density is very, very thick. So a couple of ways of dealing with that. The density to me is a very important element, because in AVID, the density of that particular, in this case, audio 2 and 3, is defining where the beat comes in and where there is silence or where there is no information. In order for you to increase that density, you hold down Command Option and hit L on the keyboard. And if you minimize it, you hold down Command Option and hit K to make it smaller. So depending on which track you select, it will respond to it. Now, mind you, this is nothing to do with the volume level. This is only visual representation of how the density is displayed in the timeline. And the specific need I have is I want to see where those beats are, or I can maybe calculate where those beats are. So if I made the density, in this case, adjusted, and it is all right for me to move on, I could move my playhead and I can identify where a surge of sound comes in. So by moving the playhead in that area, I can say, hey, that is where a sound increase is, or a sound burst is. So I'm going to do a Command / showing the entire timeline. If I zoom in, Command right bracket, I can go through. There's a beat. There we go. And if I find where I need to cut off from a specific junction, I'll stop the playhead. And the playhead is going to tell me that that's where I need to cut it off from that point all the way to the tail. And just going back to my friend from earlier, the tail, I cut off everything from the second shot all the way to the end. On the red shot, stop where I stopped. Hit the space bar. There we go, cut off from that point on. So you're cutting actually on a beat that is visual, and you use that tool, especially when you have the waveform. If there's no waveform, you have to go by your ear. So let's find out how that would work. The first thing I need to do is Command comma, open up my keyboard settings. And you notice that on the AVID systems, especially in the media composers, the M, comma, period, and / are hard assigned as trimming buttons. So if you are thinking about using M to add a marker, it may not be a good idea. But still, you want to keep the tradition, some kind of relevance to M. I have it set up for Shift M. So my marker, when I add a marker in the timeline, is going to be Shift M. Now, the question is, how do you add the marker? What track gets the marker? Generally, if you have a number of tracks, like in this case, I have the video and all the audio tracks, the top of the track is going to get the marker. So if I hit the space bar and I start playing and I start hitting the Shift M, you should expect that the top track, in this case, the video, would have those markers added. So let's see how that works. 2, 3, 4, 1. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5. Okay. So you get the idea. Now, the system in AVID Media Composer is designed in such a way that the top track takes priority, or the selected track takes priority. But if you want to add the markers to a different track and you have some markers left, go into the Tools drop-down. There is a Markers option, and you select all the markers that you have, highlighting them, hit delete them. Now you start from scratch. It is not maybe a good idea to add the markers to the video. Maybe the audio is a better choice. So you select either audio 2 or 3, or just define and say, hey, I'm going to select one of them. In this case, I selected both of them. So let's see which one gets it. The top is the one that should get it, which is what I said earlier. Same thing. Now this is much more logical because we're going to cut picture to music. But still, something can happen, music can change, can shift. So for that reason, I will again go and get rid of those markers. And now I'm going to say hello to my new friend, the time code. Now, the time code to me is much more reliable because it tells me throughout the whole story, I'm going to add the markers to that. So if anything shifts in the timeline, I still have the time code as a reference. So now when you add the markers to the time code, you can see it adds it to different places. One on the bottom of the timeline and one on the top of the timeline, which is easier to line up your playhead. Okay, so I counted using my sensibility where the beats are. Now, when those markers are in, not a bad idea to do a command that save it, and then you are ready to move around. Now, how do you move around those markers? I assigned buttons E and R, which are essentially in a default the redundancy of I and O. So I assigned the E to move to the left in the timeline left marker, and R would move me to the right marker. That's how it works for me on my keyboard, but you can assign anything you want to. In any case, when you park on one of those markers, you can just hit your tail and you are much faster in cutting to a beat. If you want to check how it looks like, clearly going back, rewinding everything and playing and trying and see how it works is the one way to do it. All right, so it's all nice and cozy, but this is a television show you're cutting. So why don't we hold down Command Shift and F and play back the entire story in full screen. Now, if you are noticing the ghost mark, which is the footage provided by Edit Stock showing up on the bottom center, is out of focus. And in order for me to explain what I'm looking at is you look at the setup of your media composer where the playback option can be manipulated. Look at the playback option that I have right now. On the bottom of the timeline, there is a yellow button that gives me an indication that I'm looking at the best performance, but it is really a low quality playback. It's a live filter, so if I change it from yellow to full green, which is the full quality, and I do the same playback, Command Shift F, look at how clean and clear the fonts are of that footage provided by Edit Stock. And this is the quality that you got in as MXF. So you're playing back the best quality that you ingested the material with. That's what that means. Why would you use this? Well, if you have a problem with playing back multiple effects, this is one of those ways of changing it from green to yellow so you can play back the effect without rendering. That's primarily the reason. So let's move on. I'm opening up a new sequence, or let's be more clear, I'm bringing in a new sequence that contains those 7 clips that I originally used to put together a story. And these clips are all 5 seconds in length. I will copy them and make a timeline where I have them 3 times. So I have the 7 clips. The first one is a purple, last one is an orange, and you can see there's 3 sets of them. On the top of the first set, let's call it the first stack, I will add a video track 2, and on video track 2 I will add a image family effect called color effect. Essentially, I am adding a filter on a second layer affecting everything below. So if you go into the effects mode, I will bring the saturation down, work with the contrast. Essentially, I am affecting everything below. Therefore, whatever was on that first stack, the 7 clips, if you turn on the filter, they will now be looking black and white. And this is generally how the explanation works. It is a layered environment. It is a second layer, and the second layer shows it. So you can see that monitoring layer 1 shows me the original, and monitoring above the layer 1, which in this case is 3, I can see how the second affects it. Now on the third track, I will add a different effect, and that effect is going to be again in the image family, or coming from the image family, called mask. The mask is a tool that you can use for multiple purposes. In this scenario, when I activate the effect editor, which is on the right side of the work area, workspace, I will make the height 80%, which cuts off the top and the bottom, gives me a, we call it like a letterbox view. And if I don't want to see the letterbox black above or below, in the effect editing, when you open up the effect editor fresh, there is a box. When you double click on it, opens up and gives you a variety of colors. I will pick a nice bluish color. And now you can see that inside a window that has blue above and below, I have black and white footage that is those 7 clips in a sequence. If I monitor it from layer 1, layer 2 and 1, and then layer 3, 2 and 1, you can see the 2 effects on 2 and 3 affecting everything below. That is logical, that makes sense. The cool thing here is that by turning on and off the monitor, you can individually define and choose which effect are you going to be applying. Now, there is a different way of dealing with this, and this scenario presumes that you are going to be using the same effect but not use up video track 2 or video track 3. I did have some presets, I just deleted them. So let me find out how I can save a preset. Going from the regular edit into the effect animation, effect editing tool, effect editing window, you can highlight, in this case, the video track 2, which gives the color effect, and drag it into a bin by clicking on the upper left hand corner of the effect icon that is draggable. There we go. Grab it and drop it in. So now the color effect is saved in the bin. And if you want to use it for additional clips or additional segments, there is a simple way to do that. But let's save also the mask. So you can see that I highlighted the mask on video 3, and I drag that mask effect from the effect editor upper left hand corner into the bin. Therefore, now I have the mask set up as well as the color. Well, to me, and for hopefully you will start to think about saving effects into a bin, and you can carry them with you. You can save them on a thumb drive, and you can have access to the effects. But in this scenario, the reason why I have it saved as a color and as a mask, because I would like to add it to the second stack of clips, which in this case I highlight in the timeline, and you notice that they are all selected. Holding down Option and double clicking on the color effect, watch what happens. It adds a blanket on video 1, and it is already black and white. So this is known as nesting an effect. So you're putting a filter, a blanket on a video layer, and if you want to have the second one, well, holding down Option and dragging the mask would be the way to add the mask on top of it. So now I have the first stack and the second stack the same result. In the scenario, the first stack uses up video 2 and 3 for effects, for the color and for the mask. In the second stack, I have everything on top of each other, which means that I am not using up the video track 2 and 3. So where is the clip? Where are the clips? On the first stack, you can see them on video 1, and they are clearly visible, they are clearly defined. On the second stack, you can only see the audio portion of those clips. So how do you identify and how do you see what's in there? Very easy. Point your playhead on that second stack, double click on the effect, and now the stack reveals what's in it. Now, visually, it looks to me like the mask is on the bottom, the color is on the top, and the clips are all the way on top. Please try to understand that it's not like that. It is the mask is in the front, the color is behind it, and behind the color are the clips. So even though geometrically right now it looks like the clips are on the top, they are behind. Try to imagine that. And notice that now you can see the entire timeline. You can see the first stack, the second stack, and the third stack. But if you use the white arrows, the step in arrow, the step out, you will actually have access to the specific nest. Watch it one more time. So if you double click on the nested stuff, it shows you stuff before in the timeline, stuff after. But if you use those white buttons on the bottom of the toolbar, the step in actually is now inside the nest. You're peeling one effect off at a time, and now you have the original footage. So you peeled off the color and then you peeled off the mask. So you first mask and then color. So that's a different way of approaching it. Still, in both instances, in order for you to recreate the effect, you would have to, which I did, save the color and the mask information. Now, let's see what the third stack gives us. In order for me to demonstrate something very unique, I need to grab the color and grab the mask effect and move them over to a third stack. But I don't want to move them, I would like to duplicate them. So the way to duplicate it is selecting them, holding Option, and when you let it go, now you duplicated the effect. So now the third stack has the same information as the first one. And if you say hello to your new friend, and the new friend is going to be called collapse. The collapse is a effect concept where you collapse a whole bunch of layers into one composite. It's not mixing it down, it's not rendering it down, it is just collapsing it. So in my case, I will select all the information, like in this case, I have 3 video tracks. Let's see if it is selectable, and I collapse it. Now notice what happens when it is collapsed. It shows up as a single video track, but the icon on top of that track, the top of that collapsed environment is different than the one you saw on the second stack. The second stack shows you that you have an effect. The third stack is also an effect, but it's a different type of an effect. So when you go into the effect editor and you try to find out, you can see on the second stack, yeah, the top is the mask, the one below it is the color, that's fine. But if you move your playhead and you go on the third stack, look at what the icon is going to be. It's a submaster. And the submaster can be saved like we did save earlier an effect, but it is going to be a different scenario that I need to play out. So whatever I had in earlier version that I prepped for the class, I deleted. So let me show you what happens when you save the submaster. Clearly, you switch from edit to the effect and workplace and grab the submaster, not the second stack. Second stack is done. Okay, we have done that. There we go. Go into the third one. Okay, third one. Open it up, refresh the effect editor. There we go. And grab and drag the effect icon into the bin that is the one that we are working on. So if you drag it, you actually have a submaster. Now, what does a submaster do? What does it remember? What can it be used for? If you go back to regular editing mode, you can check out and see that the regular editing mode doesn't do anything in terms of the submaster. It doesn't recognize it. But if you go into the effect editor again and hold down Option and drag the submaster, watch what the addition is. It now contains all the information. When I say all the information, first of all, it contains those two presets of the color effect and the mask effect. So the color and the mask are saved. But it also remembers what clips are used in that environment. Furthermore, if you want to check in regular editing mode, can you look at the effect by itself? No, the effect by itself, in this case, the mask or the color, doesn't do anything. It has to be applied to a clip. The same thing works with the submaster, but if you drag the submaster with the source, look at what you got. Okay, so now we understand the power of the submaster with the source. Source being the clips as well as the effect, or whatever is in that stack, so whatever you have in that. Now, how do you take advantage of it? This is one of those scenarios where you could have an effect template, and instead of changing everything in it, you could just step inside that submaster with a source and change the elements like the pictures. So you can have a specific animation and you can have winter shots or summer shots, or you can have sports shots as opposed to activity shots, different things, different sports. So you can actually use this. And you notice that geometrically, the stack, when you double click on it, open it up, it is resembling how it looked in the timeline. The mask being on the top, the color below that, and the clips are all the way down. So how do you decompose? How do you decollapse? There is no real way of decollapsing it. The way we handle it is we park on the effect icon, double click on it, open up the nest, and you will notice that when you open up the nest, now it resembles geometrically the same information that you saw in the timeline when it was put together. So the mask is on the top, the color is below that, and the video clips are all the way in the bottom. You select the entire section, T it, and with Option C, you copy all those inside elements into a source monitor. Now you notice that the source monitor on the left side has 3 video layers, and you can see them green. You need to make sure that you align them with the blue. So if you don't have enough, Command Y adds a 3rd video track. In this case, it is video track 3. And you notice that the alignment is video 2 goes to 1, video 3 goes to 2, and video 4 goes to 3. When you bring them in with an overwrite, which is the B Bravo button, now you have the whole thing uncollapsed, and now you are geometrically exactly where you were before. The video 1 is the clips, video 2 is the color effect, video 3 is the mask. This is a very nice and very cool way of explaining how the effect layering works in AVID, because you always think about layer 1, layer 2 affects everything below, layer 3 affects everything below 2 and 1, layer 4 affects everything below 3, 2 and 1, and that's how the system is. So now when you look at, again, for the last time, the 3 stacks, you can notice, yes, the first is very easy, very simple, very easy to visualize, and when you're a novice, this is the way you probably put your effects on it. But if you want to put effect on a single layer, you notice that the second column or the second stack would be probably the best way to go about it, as well as you can see that on the 3rd. Now, there is something about the highlighting, and this is something that I am very, very sensitive about when I work. I never select a color in the timeline that is the color of the highlight of the selection. So in the Command comma, when I open up my user settings, I had in the past only 2 flavors, dark and bright. Now you have gradations between dark and light, but that refers to how the interface looks like. I am talking about not the interface, but the highlight colors. And the highlight colors, by definition, are the most important one for me when I select something in the effect editor. So if I have the white one, or I have the, for example, purple one, let's see if I change it to purple, you see how the highlight colors now change to purple. That gives me a very, very dangerous scenario. Possibly I can have a clip colored purple. So if I select the highlight, I may be confused. I don't know what I'm selecting. So I'm sticking to pretty much a color. In this case, the bright one or the orange one, obviously you can change it, but the color that I will never use in the clip. So if I have the bright one, the highlight color in this case identifies that I am working, I'm looking at, in editing, at the color video track 2, as opposed to the mask, which is what I can switch back and forth. So the selection is one way of you identifying that you are looking at and manipulating a specific layer. And that's really helpful, especially when you have more than 2 of them. Now for a more dramatic experience, I changed the color that was black and white. I'm using something very unique. And here's the question, do I need to now put it into the bin and copy it from the bin, or, well, here's the or answer. I open up the first stack, I park on the effect icon, and I physically open up the second stack so I can see it, and physically grab it from the first stack, put it onto the second stack. So now the second stack has the same color effect. If I want to be consistent and the third stack should have the same color information, do make sure that I am still on the first stack so I can grab the effect from it. Grab it, click on the effect icon. Oh, come on now. There we go. Highlight it. Go into the effect work area. There we go. Open it up. Shows up. Come on now. It's now getting slower. So grab the effect and drag it and put it onto the third stack, color effect. So now all 3 stacks have the same color. So you did not have to save it into a bin and grab them individually. This was a much faster copy and paste of effects from one area to another area in the timeline. And you notice that all 3 stacks look the same, act the same way, except visually in the timeline they are organized differently. One is 3 layers. The second one is a blanket on layer 1, 2 blankets, and on the third one we had the collapse. So if this is something that you liked, I hope you did. I hope you are going to come back to us. Spread the word. Thank you for the sponsors. And if you want to have some classes, sign up with us. We are Future Media Concept. We do in class, on site, online. So thank you for attending the webinar. Thank you for coming. Take care, guys. Good luck.